Good morning everybody and welcome to New Frontiers Church Daily Devotionals. Well, the Christmas season is almost over. I'm holding on to my sweater for as long as I can. But the stockings have been opened. The tree is still here, but it's about to come down. But I wanted to tell you a story today about three very special trees who stood on the top of a mountaintop, dreaming about what they might be when they grew up. The first tree said, I would like to be a beautiful treasure chest. I'd like to be carved with beautiful patterns and have jewels and gold on the outside of me. And I would love to carry beautiful treasure. And I would like to be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole world. Well, the second tree said, I'd like to be a strong sailing ship. I'd like to go on adventures on the high seas. I'd like to explore lots of places, and I would like to have kings travel inside my ship, and I would take them wherever they wanted to go. I will be the strongest sailing ship in the whole world. Well, the third tree said, I would just like to stay on this mountaintop and grow taller and taller and taller and point to the heavens so that whenever people look at me, they think about God. I would like to point to God. Well, the years passed and the trees did indeed grow bigger and stronger and more beautiful until one day 3 woodcutters came stomping up the hill with their axes ready. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, this is a beautiful tree. This tree will do for me. And with 2 swoops of his axe, he felled the tree and hefted it down the mountainside. And the first tree thought, this is great. I'm going to be made into a beautiful treasure chest. The second woodcutter took one look at the second tree and said, this looks like a strong tree, fit for a strong woodcutter like me. And with one swoop of his axe, he took the tree down and he dragged it off and he took it to a boatyard. So the second tree said, this is fantastic. I'm going to be the strongest sailing ship that ever carried kings on the high seas. The third tree didn't want to be cut down. He just wanted to stand on the mountaintop and point people to God, remember? But the third woodcutter says, this is a fine tree. This will do for me, and chopped it down and dragged it off. Well, when the first tree was taken to a carpenter shop, he was so excited, thinking I'm going to be made into a beautiful treasure chest. And imagine his disappointment when he discovered that he'd been made into a feeding trough for dirty, smelly animals. Ew, that's not what he had in mind at all. Well, the second tree, she had wanted to be made into a beautiful sailing ship to take kings on the high seas, do you remember? And when she was taken to a boatyard, she thought, this is it. I'm going to be made into a beautiful ship. But no ship was being made that day. She was made into a very simple fishing boat, not strong enough for this high seas at all. She was taken to a lake where fishermen used her, and she was full of dead, smelly fish every day. Ew, not what she had in mind at all. The third tree was so sad when she was just made into a beam and just thrown in the woodpile, ready for use some other time. Well, many days and nights passed, and the 3 trees pretty much forgot about the dreams that they had had. And then one day, a new mother placed a baby in the feeding trough in the manger. And all at once he knew that he was carrying the greatest treasure in the world. Years later, a tired traveller got into the fishing boat. And as they travelled across the lake, a storm blew up. And the waves were high, and the boat thought, I'm not strong enough to keep my passengers safe. And then one of the travellers stood up and he spoke to the waves and he said, "Peace, be still." And the storm stopped. And all at once, the second tree knew that he was carrying the King of all the earth. And then, a number of months later, the third tree was dragged from the woodpile, and she was put on the shoulders of a man, and he was made to carry her to the top of a hill. He was bruised and he was bleeding, his back had been beaten. And then suddenly, cruelly and harshly, they nailed his hands to the tree. And she was just devastated. This was not what she had in mind. This was cruel and this was harsh. She had wanted to point to God. But then later, when the earth went dark and the ground shook and trembled, she knew that the world had changed forever. Every time that the people looked at that third tree on the hill, they would think about God, the Saviour of the world, who had come to earth and died for their sins and risen again so that they could be friends with God. The three trees had their dreams come true after all. So the Christmas tree points to the Easter tree. And do you remember how I talked about my secret decoration on my tree? Well, hidden in here, in the middle of the tree, is a kind of ugly decoration, just like that third tree talked about. It is a nail to remind me, as I celebrate Christmas and the presents and the food and the music and the stockings, to remind me that this Christmas tree points to the Easter tree where Jesus died for me so that I could know God and have everlasting life. And that makes me very grateful.